This is cs952, Introduction to Web Technologies and Design. And now we're going to be adding the very popular FancyBox jQuery feature to our website. The steps we're going through are very typical. We're going to be adding in, of course, the jQuery, the JavaScript that we need. We're also going to be adding in some CSS and an initialization script. To keep everything as simple as possible, I've already provided the files for you in the tutorial folder, though you can go out on the web and do a Google search for FancyBox and you'll find the FancyBox homepage, and there's a lot of other features that we're not getting into. So let's go through what we need to do to add FancyBox to our website. So first, I'm going to get started by copying over some of the images that we need. In order for FancyBox to work, we've got little buttons and stuff that you're going to be seeing on the web page, and those require some images. So I'm going to go to inside of my tutorial folder. If we open up our tutorial folder, there's a folder there called jQuery, and it's got everything that we need for this jQuery module. And I can see that there is an images folder, and inside of the images folder, I've got a folder called FancyBox. So what I want to do is move the FancyBox folder from the images folder inside of the jQuery folder. I want to move that into my primary images folder where I'm keeping all of the images for my website. So to move it over, I just click on this folder that says FancyBox, just click and drag up to the images folder. And then Dreamweaver says, do you want to update the links? And I'll say yep. Now it's important that it goes in this particular place because I've edited some of the CSS so that FancyBox knows where to find these images. If you don't put it here in the right place, the program will still run. You'll still be able to get the features of FancyBox, but you won't have the additional little icons that kind of give it the visual effect that we're looking for. So I put inside of my images folder, I've got this folder called FancyBox. We're good there. Now we need to move over our jQuery and we need to move over our CSS. So let's get started with the CSS. So the first folder that I have here, looking at my website, my first folder with my assets is my CSS folder. And inside of that you can see these files you're familiar with, our bootstrap, our nav file, our styles. So I'm going to go back to my tutorial folder, and again inside of my jQuery folder, if I open up my CSS folder, there's a file called fancybox.css. So we're just going to drag that from the tutorial folder and just drag it into my CSS folder. Dreamweaver asked, do we want to update the links? And we sure do, so we say update. And then the last thing that we need to drag over is the actual JavaScript. You may have thought, well, that was all we needed, but as often is the case, there are little accessory files that you need to make things work. So I'm just closing up these folders here. So I'm going to take the file that's called fancybox.js. It's in the JS folder, inside of the jQuery folder, inside of my tutorial folder, and I'm just going to drag that file over and put it in my primary JS folder. So there, and we're all set. So what we've done just now is fairly typical for installing some jQuery to your website. So now that I have all the files in place, we need to hook everything up into our template file. And we're going to get started again with our CSS. So I've got my template file open right now. And if I look here in my DOM panel, I'm going to click on the head tag, and I can see here represents all the child elements inside of the head there. And we can see we've got a bunch of links. As I click on these links, the first link is a link to my Bootstrap CSS file. Next one is a link to my nav file. It has the coloration for my navigation. Next link is for my styles file, and then the next link is the link for my font awesome. So let's add our FancyBox right after font awesome. So I'm going to click to put my cursor right at the end of the link for our font awesome CSS file. And I'm going to hit enter just to give myself one extra line. Now I'm going to open up my CSS folder here. Just click on the plus box to expand the view of this folder, and I see fancybox.css. So I just click on that icon and just drag it over, and Dreamweaver will drop it right in place. There we go. And Dreamweaver says that it would like us to refresh the page since we just made some changes to code. That'd be fine. Okay, great. So now we can see we've got a new link for our CSS. The next step is we need to bring in the JavaScript for our fancy box. And we've been putting all the script at the end of our page. So going back to my DOM panel, I'm going to close up this head tag, and if I look inside of the body, I've got nav, and then section, and then footer, and then after the footer we've got several script tags. The first one is the script tag for our jQuery library. Next one is the script tag for the custom JavaScript that we're using for the Bootstrap 3 framework. The next script tag is the one that helps our navigation out. So I'm going to click after this third script tag, the one that has the navigation, and I'm going to hit enter again a couple times, give myself a little bit of room. And I'm going to go to my JS file, and I'm going to drag over my fancy box file. So let's just drag that right on over there. Okay, so this will now be loading the fancy box JavaScript, but we have one more change we need to make. And this is the initialization file. So let me close up these icons here, and let's go back to our tutorial folder. And I can close up some of these folders here. If you don't have it already open, open up the textfiles.txt. And I'm going to do a little search for fancy box. F-A-N-C-Y-B-O-X. There we go. So this is what we need right here. This fancy box initialization code. It says fancy box lightbox. So I'm going to highlight all this code. This is at line 156 in my file. Probably should be about the same for yours. And I'm going to copy that. Then I'm going to go back to my template file. And right after this line that we already have, the script that we just added, I'm going to hit enter. And I'm going to hit paste again. And I'm going to highlight this text. And I'm going to hit the tab key. I'm just highlighting the text and hitting the tab key just to get everything to line up. And then Dreamweaver saying, hey, you've made some changes in the code view. Would you like to refresh? And we would. Okay. So we added the CSS that we needed to our template page. Then we went to the bottom and we added in the link to the fancy box JavaScript file. And this last part is real important. We call this the initialization script. So this says when this page loads, it loads the fancy box JavaScript, but then we have more specific instructions here. Now this part where it says type equals JavaScript, remember, we can get rid of this. This was something that was, this type attribute was required in HTML4, but we're working in HTML5. If you want to delete it, you can just delete it. Okay. Then the next thing we have inside of our script is we have document ready. And as you recall from the study notes, the document ready, that is a function that says don't execute this code until the page is ready, until all the elements have loaded and everything's ready. Then you can run this code, because in the case of Fancy Box, you're going to be able to click on things and work with images. We want to make sure all of our images are loaded and ready to go. So the document ready, it is one of the most commonly used jQuery functions, because it says wait until everything's ready. Now also notice that these lines, the document ready in Fancy Box, start with a $sign. And as you recall, the $sign is just a shortcut for jQuery. I could type jQuery and put that in place of the $sign, and the code is going to work just as well. We just use that $sign because it's a little bit of a shortcut. And then we have the actual, this next line, line 107, this is the actual Fancy Box line of code right here. So this says run the Fancy Box function, F-A-N-C-Y-B-O-X, with the parentheses after it, but we need to tell Fancy Box what to target on the page. We have all kinds of stuff on the page, and you'll notice that we have a very typical CSS selector, period Fancy Box. That means class is equal to Fancy Box. And again, that's one of the features of using jQuery, is that you don't have to use exotic get element by ID pure JavaScript selectors. You can use common CSS selectors. So if I wanted to target everything with the class of Fancy Box, I just put in period Fancy Box. If I wanted to target my footer, I could put in # footer and it would target my footer. If I wanted to target all of the paragraph elements on the page, then I could just put the letter P in here and it would target all of our standard HTML paragraph elements. So again, the nice thing about JavaScript is that we can use standard CSS selectors. So we've got everything ready to go. I am going to hit refresh. I'm going to go and choose Save All. Then Dreamweaver wants to know, do you want to save all the files created with the template? We're going to say Update. We've got everything all set and saved. We'll go ahead and close this. I'm going to close my template file and close my text files. And when we come back, we'll get started using FancyBox on our home page.